Flatliners at 10 to 9 on a Thursday or Wednesday evening, whenever it was that I went to see it in Southampton, because it wasn't press screened in advance. So I saw
Always a bad sign.
Always a bad sign. Do you remember the original Flatliners?
When did it come out?
Well, it came out in the 80s.
I don't remember the 80s.
You don't remember the 80s at all? Okay. Actually, I think it was 1990. I think the original Flatliners, let me just check this. I think it was actually 1990, so you should remember that. So anyway, the original Flatliners came out, and it was one of those movies that at the time everybody thought was a really, really sort of, 1990.
With a cult on the soundtrack?
No, I can't remember. It's directed by Joel Schumacher, at his most Joel Schumacher.
Yeah.
Essentially,
I do remember it.
The story was a bunch of medical students decide to stop their hearts in order to experience the afterlife, and each one of them then experiences a kind of fantasy which then follows them back into the real world, and and it's all to do with facing up to your own demons. The thing that was most remembered about the first one was that it was nobody said anything unless they were wearing a blouson, slightly translucent shirt. And
well, we all wore that kind of stuff.
And also they were standing in front of a very big light, providing backlight and waiting for smoke to waft across and to tousle their full head trees and mullet haircuts. So it was basically a film in which everyone looked like they were an extra in a Duran Duran video or an Ultravox video, and it made no sense whatsoever. Anyway, so now we have the remake, and the remake essentially, well, is it a remake or is it a sequel? The jury is out. Essentially, same setup. Bunch of medical students decide that they want to know what happens in the afterlife. They stop their hearts, and then weird stuff starts to happen. Here's a very brief clip.
Whatever's happening to us, these hallucinations, these hauntings, whatever it is, it's only going to get worse. And until we figure it out, until we figure out what to do, whatever killed her is going to kill all of us too.
So, the remake is directed by Niels Arden Oplev, who is a perfectly decent...
By who?
Niels Arden Oplev.
Okay.
Who's a perfectly decent director and, Dragon Tattoo and all that sort of stuff. And it has actually a very decent cast, which is headed up by Ellen Page and Diego Luna, both of whom I like very much. Kiefer Sutherland is also in it, and there was a question about if Kiefer Sutherland is in it, is it therefore a sequel rather than a remake? And there was apparently, at one point, a sequence in which he said something that suggested that he was the Kiefer Sutherland who'd been in the first film, even though he had a different name, and so therefore the whole thing tied up. But then they took it out, and in fact the director said, yeah, we took it out because the older audience, he said the older audience would be like, oh, he's changed his name, but he is the guy from the first film, but the younger audience didn't understand diddly squat of that scene, so took it out. So now Kiefer is in it, but not linked in any way to the original. And it is one of those films in which you think all the things that were wrong with the first film, which was that it made no sense. It was all to do with, as I said, backlighting, blouson shirts, hair, Ultravox videos. Now, you've got rid of the backlighting, the hair, the blouson video and the Ultravox video, but you've still got the thing which makes no sense at all. So essentially, the plot is as absolutely dim-witted as it always was. You stop your heart. The minute your heart stops, you start floating off into a fantasy sequence. It's going to last 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Then you're going to come back. But you astrally project the minute that your heart stops. Secondly, it's not just that I didn't believe that after those things happened that the people were dead. I didn't believe they were alive in the first place. I didn't believe that any of them were medical students. I didn't believe that any of them knew anything whatsoever about the subject they were meant to be. And I did not believe that there was any danger or any sort of sense of, funnily enough, the thing's billed as being a horror movie. And I went to look back up the first Flatliners review, and I'd forgotten that the first Flatliners was reviewed as being a thriller horror. I'd totally forgotten that it was meant to be horrifying, and there were certain sort of, very, very borderline creepy moments in the remake, but essentially it's the same dumb thriller thing. So, that one. Number two, Ellen Page kind of did a version of this in Inception, this sort of, the dream states, and this is another dream state movie, but this is, from Inception to Insufferable. Thirdly...
just it needs a little round of applause, I think, that. From
Inception to Insufferable, thank you very much. All these cast, perfectly talented performers, some of them all seem to have spent more time worrying about their hair and makeup than they do about, having anything to do with medicine. Because every single medical scene, there's like a strand of hair hanging down, another strand of hair hanging down. It's just, you just want to put your hair up. You're meant to be working in a hospital. Halfway through the film, I start I realised that it was just going to play out in this really... It's not... The worst thing about it is it's not terrible. It's not like really, really terrible. It's just like really, really plodding and really, really dull. And I found myself starting to... I know it's the obvious gag. Found myself starting to fall asleep because it was like the thing started 10 to 9, the adverts. Film starts at 9:20. And you realise the setup is exactly the same. We're just going to go through they've got to do that and they've got to do the thing. They're all going to have to face up to their guilty demons and understand that unless they give the guilty demons, then they're going to twist them into the forest. And so I started thinking about all the other films that it reminded me about. And I started thinking about Ken Russell's Altered States. And Ken Russell's Altered States is a really, really great film. And in Altered States, William Hurt absolutely looks like he is staring into the void, like he is staring into the abyss, like he is looking the creation of mankind square in the face. And in this, every single one of them looks like they are looking at a catalogue of casual footwear. And the reason that there's no interest is that the cast appear to be completely uninterested in what's going on. Uninterested or disinterested. I think we had that discussion before.
I think we have. Catalogue of casual footwear actually...
That was an indie band from the 1980s, wasn't it?
But more enjoyable than looking into the abyss in general.
Yeah. Well, watching the film could have done with a little bit more horror and a little less casual footwear. And I really did find myself fighting sleep. I didn't. I stayed awake, but I had to, I was constantly, moving around in my seat to just thought, there's only this many of them they have to get through. So not terrible, just terribly dull.